Engineers with Mental Health Issues by Jenna Quindica.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks for joining me here. Thank you to the PyCon staff, volunteers, everyone on the selection committee. You know, if you see someone with a volunteer or staff badge, make sure to thank them for putting together a wonderful event. That would be great. I'm really happy to be here in Cleveland and at PyCon. Okay, let's dive in. My friend Matt describes me as a software magician and senior oops engineer. I've been working in tech for 5 years. I've worked at a handful of startups in upstate New York, Los Angeles, and the Bay Area, currently based in SF. A good friend of mine gifted me this grumpy cat and said, "You are basically Grumpy Cat." I don't know if you can see the resemblance. I'm not a doctor. We're going to be talking about mental health, but I'm not a doctor. I'm a software engineer. I'm also not a medical professional. None of this that you're going to hear today is medical advice. I'm going to say this over and over again. This is not medical advice. We're going to take a sec right now to check in. I'm going to be talking about mental illness, my personal story, things that people can do to make the workplace more inclusive. If you're not in the right headspace to be listening to this talk, I definitely encourage you to get up and leave, and feel free to change your mind at any time. Just feel free to bow out at any time. That won't offend me. I volunteer with Open Sourcing Mental Illness, OSMI, or OSMI, a nonprofit changing the way we talk about mental health in the tech community. Towards the end, I'll talk more about OSMI and how OSMI can help you. And for the rest of the conference, I'll be hanging out at the OSMI booth. Come say hi. I'm actually sitting right across from a guy autographing his books on Intro to Python. That's how you can find me. What I want to accomplish this afternoon, I want you to walk away from this talk feeling more comfortable discussing mental health during everyday life and in the workplace. And why me? I get this question a lot. Things have been rough for me lately. My friend Matt would say that that's an understatement. Matt is actually a fellow volunteer with Open Sourcing Mental Illness. When I first started speaking at conferences about mental health in May 2018, I mentioned how difficult 2017 was for me. You know, 2017 was really bad. The thing with mental illness is that while things may get better over time, unfortunately, your mental health can and sometimes will regress. I feel like I'm coming out of a rut myself right now, mostly because I didn't used to know how to effectively communicate what I was going through, and this meant that people didn't know how to help me. I'm still not great at communicating my emotions, but I've gotten to a place where it's clear to me how to get better at communicating, which is to practice, practice, practice. So I'm giving this talk because, one, I've been there. I'm currently there, and I want people to know they're not alone. Two, I'm practicing communicating. This is for me. Practicing how to advocate for myself and my mental health issues. And three, I want to empower you to start talking about mental health. I've learned a lot these past couple years through treatment, and the content I'll be sharing today is separated into two parts: education and advocacy. You can't support engineers with mental health issues unless you know what having a mental health issue means, and it's different for everyone, but there are some common themes. In the education part, I'm going to talk a lot about what I've tried to take care of myself because I want you to know what's out there. The advocacy portion will include actionable steps you can take to make your workplace more inclusive to people with mental health issues. Remember, not a doctor or a medical professional. None of this is medical advice. Let's get down to business. I've been dealing with depression for a long time, essentially ever since I can remember. The thing is, I'm just too tired to buy things, or do things, or get things, or say things, or face things. That's from Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, a romantic comedy musical TV show about mental health. I highly recommend it. The season finale was a couple weeks ago, and the whole series is on Netflix now. I checked, it's actually on Netflix, in the US. I'm not the only one who is depressed. Clinical depression affects 7.1% of American adults every year. That's about 17 million people. And depression is the leading cause of disability worldwide. and is a major contributor to the global burden of disease. What even is depression? For me, and depression can manifest pretty differently for different people, depression follows this pattern. I start oversleeping. I can't really get out of bed in the morning. I start to roll into the office later than I usually do, which leads to being late to work. I used to commute from San Francisco to Redwood City, which is about 24 miles via Caltrain, and I often wouldn't be able to make that last express train southbound, so I'd have to take the local, which makes every stop, and so it'd take me over an hour door to door to get to work, so, you know, it compounds. I can sleep for 10 to 12 hours a night. Basically, I get home at 8 p.m. and pass out until 8 a.m. I become irritable at home and at work, and if you know me, I am not very fun to be around when I'm irritable. My friends get on my nerves, and I start to withdraw so that they don't see my irritation. I like to hide. Basic stuff stops happening, like taking out the trash, doing the dishes, doing my laundry. Yes, I have definitely purchased more underwear because I ran out of clean underwear and didn't want to do laundry. Lastly, the symptom of depression that I hate the most, I fall prey to cognitive distortions. I'm going to share more about cognitive distortions, but before we do that, I'm going to talk briefly about anxiety. So anxiety can manifest pretty differently for different people. For me, it's like this. Boo! I can go from calm to anxious in less than a second. Anxiety sneaks up on me. Oftentimes, I don't know why I'm anxious, and it takes me some time to figure out what's going on. I wore a breathing monitor for a while that would vibrate whenever I had a spike in number of breaths per minute. This is a good proxy for anxiety. Turns out, I get anxious whenever I get into an Uber or Lyft. A good way to picture anxiety is as mind weasels. They're things that run around your mind wreaking havoc. I can't sleep at night when I'm anxious. I have difficulty falling asleep and difficulty staying asleep. If you ever get a "you up" message from me at 3 a.m., just know that it's not a booty call, but rather that I'm experiencing anxiety and want to talk to a friend. My Apple Watch reports a highly fluctuating heart rate on particularly anxiety-ridden days. Sometimes I look at my heart rate data for the past 24 hours, I see that it's spiky, and only then does it occur to me that I was actually anxious. And the last symptom worth mentioning is that I get nauseous, and sometimes I'll actually throw up. That's not really funny, but I don't know why I'm laughing, but if I can be a bit meta for a sec, preparing for this talk made me super anxious, especially as I was walking around the exhibition hall this morning and people actually said they remembered seeing my talk in the program and were planning to come. Thanks for coming. You know who you are. Circling back to cognitive distortions. I learned about cognitive distortions in cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. Cognitive distortions are thoughts that cause individuals to perceive reality inaccurately. They're irrational thoughts. Cognitive behavioral therapy provides a framework for addressing your cognitive distortions. So here's some examples. All or nothing thinking. Everything is bad. Nothing is good. Jumping to conclusions. Hey, everyone got invited to a meeting except me. I must be getting fired. Catastrophizing. The site's down, it's going to be down forever, and I'm going to get fired. Magnification or minimization. I'm giving this talk, and I didn't really nail the introduction. I sucked at giving my talk. Tunnel vision. I hate my job, therefore I hate everything. Discounting or disqualifying the positive. So my manager praised my work, but I'm still bad at my job. Cognitive distortions are rough. When you start to believe and internalize them, cognitive distortions make you feel worse about yourself because it's hard to remember what's true, what's good, who loves you, and who cares about you. One way to work through a cognitive distortion is to use a thought record. So what's a thought record? It's a worksheet you can fill out in this order. It's an algorithm. Describe the situation. Use facts. What happened? Where? When? With whom? How? Describe the emotion. How intense was it? How did you feel it in your body? Write the negative automatic thought. Okay, and so you're having this automatic thought, negative automatic thought. What are some things that support this thought? Is there any evidence against that thought? If so, what are they? Now, write an alternative, more realistic and balanced perspective, and check in. How are you feeling now? I found thought records hard to fill out at first, because when I'm feeling awful, my mind races and jumps from one judgment or distortion to another very quickly. But I try to take a deep breath and focus. If I can slow my thoughts down, then I'm able to piece apart the distortion with a thought record. It's really hard. In therapy, you can get a ton of practice going through a thought record with a therapist. Therapy can be really scary and daunting. As an engineer, what I find scary are the things that are unknown. For example, if I'm on a tight deadline and I don't yet know how long something will take, I get scared. Recently, having to deploy a WordPress site on short notice scared the shit out of me. Exactly the same with therapy. I didn't know how long it'd take to feel better. I didn't know what steps I'd have to take to get better. And I still don't know. My therapist doesn't tell me when I can expect to get better. Just may just be me, though. If I were to go back and start therapy from scratch, I'd approach therapy like how I approach pair programming. So therapy, in my experience, is collaborative. The therapist is like a teaching assistant, or a more senior engineer, or an engineer who simply knows more about a topic than me. I can expect that my therapist will catch me before I write a bug, or have a cognitive distortion. A caveat that, like many relationships, there are therapists that work for you and therapists who don't. It is normal to have to shop around for a therapist. I saw maybe 5 therapists before I settled on the therapist who I see currently, and I've been seeing him for the past 2 years. I've definitely heard of people finding a great therapist right away, but please don't get demoralized if it takes some time to find the right therapist. You're probably wondering, how do you know if a therapist is right for you? I can't answer this for you, but some questions I'd ask post-initial appointment are, did my therapist instill trust? If not, do I think there's potential for me to trust this therapist? Do I communicate effectively with this therapist? I start there and see how things go. Remember, this is not medical advice. This is how I think about therapy. I'm not you, and I'm not in your head. It's been about 5 years that I've been actively working on my mental health. I'm going to go quickly through some of the other things that I've tried. There's no slide for these because there are too many things to enumerate on a single slide. If you have any questions about these, please feel free to follow up with me later. Keep in mind, I did not try all of these things at once or necessarily in this order. It's an unordered list. Oh, not that. I've done individual cognitive behavioral therapy. I've done couples counseling. I've seen a psychiatrist. I've taken psychiatric medications, antidepressants, anti-anxiety meds, mood stabilizers, and atypical antipsychotics. I've attended a depression skills group. I've attended a depression support group. They're different. I've facilitated a depression support group. I've attended a dialectical behavioral therapy skills group. I've seen an anxiety therapist, and I've tried meditation apps like Calm and Headspace. And I am currently looking into taking a course on mindfulness-based stress reduction. So it's a lot. It's not even everything that's out there. There are lots of really fun new therapies coming out. The research that's happening in the mental health industry is amazing. What I've been most excited about in the past year or so is this FDA-approved digital pill, Abilify. So it's a digital pill because it's a medication embedded with a sensor that can tell doctors whether and when patients take their medicine. The medication I'm talking about is called Abilify, which is used to treat schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. I asked my doctor if I could be prescribed the digital pill version of Abilify, and she said that taking a medication because it's cool is not a reason to take a medicine, unfortunately for me. Also, it's expensive and probably not covered by health insurance. But hey, it's out there. People are innovating in this space. I want to tell you a little more about dialectical behavioral therapy because I don't think many people know about it. I personally had never heard of it before 2 years ago. So dialectical behavioral therapy, according to Psychology Today, provides clients with new skills to manage painful emotions and decrease conflict in relationships. It's a protocol that was developed by a female professor of psychology named Marsha Linehan for treating those with borderline personality disorder. DBT specifically focuses on providing therapeutic skills in 4 key areas: mindfulness, distress tolerance, emotion regulation, and interpersonal effectiveness. What's unique about DBT as compared to CBT is its focus on acceptance of a patient's experience while balancing the work needed to change negative behaviors. That sounds great, right? A while ago, my psychiatrist signed me up for a DBT skills group, and I went to class once. I didn't exactly have a pleasant experience. See, the first thing they have you do, at least in this group, is you sit in silence for 15 minutes. So you arrive on time to sit in silence for 15 minutes. You're supposed to clear your head, stop thinking, practice mindfulness. And as I tried to follow instructions, all I could think about was how uncomfortable that chair was. I have a lot of chronic pain in my back and neck because, I'm a software engineer who hunches over a keyboard all day. And those 15 minutes were uncomfortable enough for me to decide that DBT was not for me and that I would not go back for the foreseeable future. Over a year later, I finally decided I was ready to go back. I needed it. And I made sure that I was prepared mentally for that mindfulness activity that they would start with. The thing that I hated most about those 15 minutes, I just said chronic pain, but it's really about, what kind of dark thoughts come when you have nothing to do and you're just sitting there and you're waiting. And you're not supposed to be waiting, right? You're supposed to be clearing your head. Anyway, it's very uncomfortable for me. I'm telling you this so you're better prepared than I was for that first group if you decide to pursue dialectical behavioral therapy. My favorite thing I've learned in DBT is self-soothing, which falls under the distress tolerance umbrella. Self-soothing is exactly what you think it is. There are ways to cope in stressful situations that don't involve substances like alcohol or weed or other drugs. When I first moved to San Francisco from LA, I lost my big self-soothing skills. I could not go to the beach anymore. Like, the beach in SF sucks. I'm just gonna go out and say that. It wasn't until I took a DBT skills group course that I relearned how to self-soothe. So here's some of my curated self-soothing skills. I pulled these from the book DBT Skills Training Handbooks and Worksheets, 2nd edition. Watch a sunrise or sunset. One of my favorite ways to watch a sunset is while driving along the California coast. Not that I drive, I don't drive. I beg friends to drive me, or sometimes Lyft drivers. You can walk in a pretty part of town, anywhere with trees or cool architecture or grass. Sing to your favorite songs. You don't have to sing well, just sing. You can listen to soothing music. Sample flavors in an ice cream store. I'm lactose intolerant, so I have to take like 5 lactates, but it's worth it. Take a long hot bath or shower. I don't know if you noticed, but we all got bath bombs in our PyCon swag bag. You can wrap up in a blanket, like a burrito. The other big part of DBT that I use all the time is the concept of wise mind, which falls under the mindfulness umbrella. Wise mind is the idea that you can make a decision that satisfies your emotional side and your cognitive or intellectual side. Which choice makes you feel good and is also smart? People using wise mind are able to recognize and respect their feelings while responding to them in a rational manner. If you'd like to learn more about DBT, I recommend finding a DBT therapist or asking your current therapist if they can do DBT with you. DBT skills groups are great too, but they're expensive and often have strict rules on who qualifies for them. I've also found it difficult to get access to a group because the waitlist is full. What I've seen is that you have to be in weekly individual therapy to be accepted into the group, and some people are more strict than others. So like, for example, my therapist went out of town for a month, and I didn't qualify for the group anymore. Asking for help is hard. We grow up thinking that people who ask for help are weak. They can't figure stuff out on their own. We ask ourselves, what's wrong with them? This is the stigma talking. Asking for help means you've acknowledged your blind spots and can trust that someone not only knows better than you, but they can help you. We come across this all the time when we're mentoring junior engineers. We want them to be resourceful, but there is a learning curve, and we have to respect that learning curve. Being in treatment for me means I'm constantly iterating on myself. Humor me for a second. I'm gonna frame therapy as an agile sprint. Okay, so the time between therapy appointments is like a sprint. You are actively working on yourself, finishing tickets, moving them to done status, and then you go to therapy, and you do your retrospective for 30 minutes. Like, how did the past week go? How successful were the skills that you practiced? Then you do sprint planning for the second half. And there are OKRs. So for me, my OKR is living the life I want to live based on my values. So for example, a good OKR could be building and or maintaining 3 close friendships within a year, or traveling 4 times a year. A therapist can help you reach your goals. I mean, that's kind of what they're there for. Going back. One of my closest friends provides a sit rep, a situation report, to his therapist the night before his appointment. Then he sits in the waiting area of his therapist's office. Then the appointment starts, and he gives his therapist 5 to 10 minutes to read the sit rep. Then, now that the therapist has all the necessary context, they can dive right into the retro and sprint planning. It's perfect, efficient meeting. Like, you send the agenda ahead of time, and then you go over time management. I think it's really smart. I don't know why more people don't do this. Okay, so let's recap what we learned about mental illness. So depression affects many people. It sucks. It's different for everyone. Anxiety sucks, and it's different for everyone. We learned about cognitive distortions and how to battle them with a thought record. We talked about cognitive behavioral therapy and finding a therapist. We talked about dialectical behavioral therapy and some DBT skills that you could learn and practice with a DBT therapist. And I poorly compared therapy to agile sprints. This next part is how you can help and advocate for those with mental illness. The first thing that I think lays a solid foundation is the book that Open Sourcing Mental Illness created, titled Mental Health and Tech Guidelines for Employees. The book goes over the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and the workplace accommodations that are covered by the ADA. It is a really great resource that walks through should, when, and how you ask for accommodations for disability. There's a section in the book for types of reasonable accommodations, categorized by, I'm just gonna list these off quickly so you kind of have a sense of what to expect. Concentration, memory, organization, time management, stress or emotions, panic attacks, sleep disturbances, fatigue, attendance, coworker interaction, and working effectively. Some of the accommodations are straightforward, and your team may already be doing them. Allow for open communication. Don't we all want this? Why is this a reasonable accommodation? I don't know, but allow for open communication. Provide positive praise and reinforcement. Develop strategies to deal with conflict. Plan for uninterrupted work time. That's just good project management. Work from home. Allow a flexible schedule. Divide large assignments into smaller tasks and goals. That's just good engineering. Schedule consistent meetings with your report to set goals and review progress. And you can refer to counseling and or employee assistance programs, EAPs. There are many more accommodations outlined in the book. You can go to osmehelp.org/resources to get the PDF for free or with a donation. On a micro level, here's some things I recommend because I know that they work for me. Tell people they matter if they do. This can be as simple as saying, "Hi, I care about you." Or you can grab coffee for someone. My skip level, every time he goes to get coffee, he asks the whole office, "Does anyone want anything?" You know, it's so nice. You can give someone praise. "Hey, that meeting was awesome. Thank you for starting it on time. Thank you for running a swift agenda. Thank you for wrapping up on time." You can ask them how they're doing and actively listen to the answer. You know, have you ever walked down the stairs and someone is just like, "Hi, how are you?" And you say, "Hi, how are you?" And then you both walk away and none of you answer? That is not active listening. Be respectful of what you say or how you portray mental illness. I encourage you to reconsider using the word crazy because of the stigma associated with it. What do you really mean when you say crazy? Are you sure you can't say ridiculous or nonsensical instead? Please try not to contribute to the stigma. For example, people who are depressed are not lazy. The best way to reduce stigma is for people with mental illness to talk about their experience. So talk about it. At a macro level, encourage conversations about mental health at all levels of your company or organization. You can start small on your team. If you're a senior engineer, take a mental health day and set that example that people can do that. A year ago when I gave this talk, someone in HR asked me how one could facilitate these conversations. And I suggested creating a mental health Slack channel and seeding the channel with articles or blog posts that spurn conversation. If you're in a leadership position, you can totally participate and kick off these conversations. Another thing you can do, and this is probably the hardest one, is create a psychologically safe space. So what is psychological safety? It's a shared belief that the team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. In other words, it's being able to show and employ oneself without fear of negative consequences of self-image, status, or career. If a space is psychologically safe, then people feel accepted and respected. Teams that are not psychologically safe have the following characteristics. People feel unsafe to innovate. They feel unsafe to resolve conflict. They feel unsafe to admit they need help. Intercom has a great blog post about psychological safety. This wraps up the advocacy portion of my talk. Before I leave, I want to give some shout outs to various nonprofits that have aided in my mental health journey that might be able to help you. The first is the Depression and Bipolar Support Alliance, abbreviated to DBSA. Disclaimer, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. I've spoken a bunch about bipolar disorder last year. That's something that I deal with. This nonprofit offers support groups for those with depression and bipolar disorder. The support group helped me better understand what I was experiencing because I learned a shared language for explaining my symptoms. Others in the group set my expectations and warned me about medication. They helped me understand when I should be reaching out to a therapist or a psychiatrist about my mental health. I recommend this support group if you have depression or bipolar disorder, or a mood disorder in general, and would like to meet others with depression or bipolar disorder or mood disorders in general. The DBSA website has a find a support group feature where you can search by zip code. Another nonprofit that I'd like to highlight is NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. They have many resources on their website for learning about mental illness. You might have noticed some of the statistics in my talk came from NAMI's site. They're always looking for volunteers, and they have a great email newsletter. And lastly, the nonprofit Open Sourcing Mental Illness is really the reason I'm here speaking today. OSME's goal is to change the way we talk about mental health in the tech industry. We conduct a survey annually about the state of mental health, and we actually anonymize and publish our data set on Kaggle if you're interested. I would love to see someone post a Medium blog post where they analyze our data set. That'd be super cool. OSME runs an online forum where people can discuss mental health. It used to be called DevPressed. And as you know, OSME sends speakers to tech conferences where we can all have conversations about mental illness. If you want to see more mental health talks, I would recommend watching Ed Finkler's talk, Stronger Than Fear. It's excellent. I would watch the version that he gave at Google. That's a great recording. Yeah. I feel extremely lucky to have been invited here today. If I convince at least one of you to bring up mental health in your workplace, that's a mission accomplished. Thank you so much for coming and listening to me talk about a topic near and dear to my heart. If you have any questions, feel free to pull me aside afterwards. I will be doing a Q&A for about 10 minutes. Better yet, come visit me at the OSME booth. That would be fun. Thank you.